Okay. So, good morning, everyone. A warm welcome from Indian Lawyer Association, that's ILA. So, as we know, ILA is a voluntary professional organization that provides a platform for the legal fraternity in India, where we can discuss the legal issues and help for the betterment of the society. For today's session, we are honored to have esteemed guest and our moderator, Mr. Navneet Chugh, who is the chairman of ILA and managing partner at Chugh LLP. And topic for today's is taxes, which I think is the most important pillar for the economic growth of any country. Now I request Mr. Chugh to lead the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Gagan, Gagan, can you hear me?
Yes, after a bit of struggle, I've been able to load.
Okay. So since you were the president of ILA last year, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about ILA? Okay.
No. Hello.
Gagan, can you hear me?
Yeah, which
Okay.
आपको
All right.
लिंक मिली या नहीं?
So we started Indian Lawyers Association 6 years ago. We have 80 chapters right now. Our goal is that we want 400 chapters. There's 400 cities in India that have a population of over 1 lakh. We would like a chapter in all 400 cities. The purpose of ILA is very simple. We want to be the industry body. There is Bar Council of India, but that's the regulatory arm. But the lawyers as an industry body don't have a NASCOM or a FICCI or CII. So we want to be the industry body and represent the lawyers of India. There's a lot of things that the lawyers need to do in India. Before independence, the lawyers of India had a lot of power. Maybe 80 of the top 100 people that got us independence were lawyers. But when lawyers got freedom for the rest of India, they forgot that they were in jail and they left the lock on and threw away the key. And lawyers cannot advertise in the country, cannot have a booth at a conference, cannot have a website, cannot take matters on a contingency basis. Any country that doesn't allow contingency lawyering has a sign outside the country that says no justice for the poor, because the purpose of law is to protect the powerless from the powerful and the government. And the only way the powerless have power is through the court system and judiciary and lawyers. But if lawyers are going to charge, then the powerless and poor don't have any power. And for India to not allow lawyers to take matters on a contingency basis is literally a crime of its own. And other issues with the legal profession, because there's 49 million pending cases, the judicial systems works at a crawling pace. Clients are not happy, and so they don't want to pay. They don't feel like they're getting justice. So as a result, most of the lawyers in India are not having a fulfilled professional life. So that's why we started Indian Lawyers Association. Uh, a long journey, lots to do. Nothing will happen quickly, shortly, but we're going to hang in there no matter how long it takes. And yeah, fine, I have laid out a few opinions, but we're not married to them. Purpose of ILA is to provide a foundation, and then the lawyers of India can jump on the stage and dance and sing and protest and make changes or do whatever they want. Open body for everyone. Okay, let's talk about taxes. So if we start a new country on a new planet, all of us get together, one of the first things we would do is we need roads and schools and lights and electricity and dams and water and and hospitals, and therefore we need money. So we'd come up with a wonderful tax system. Now, if you look at, there is a beautiful thing on Google and Wikipedia. It's a thing called percentage of tax, rather tax as a percentage of GDP. And the first time I saw that, I'm like, wow, never even heard of it, that there is a thing called what in a country is tax as a percentage of GDP. So a majority of the 192 countries on the planet are at about 25% of taxes at 25% of the GDP. The 5-6 heavenly countries in Northern Europe are at 50%. India is at 12%. And so if you look at a country, the world GDP is about 100 trillion. If you look at a country like United States, the GDP of about 21 trillion, 7 trillion is the US government spend. So 1/3 of the GDP of United States is the government spending, the largest employer in the country, 19 million people. So in a way, if India would just charge people more tax and spend it for social programs and do other wonderful things that need to be done, provide housing for the 100 million homeless, then the GDP goes up. And so that's a nice secret that we need to talk about. So we have a wonderful panel of Rahul and Agarwal and Arindam Lahiri and Nirmal Mathew and Hardeep Chawla and Hirak Shah. We have not sat together and prepared and not coached. And so we're going to have a free for all. And I feel we have such a wonderful, intelligent, mature panel that we can talk to them about anything and everything. So welcome, everyone. As I ask you your first question, if you can give us a brief introduction as well. Arindam recently got an award. Tell us what you do, Arindam, and tell us what the award is for. And then tell us what's wrong with the Indian tax system and what is your plan to fix it?
Thanks, Navneet. So I am a chartered accountant by profession, had done my ICWA also. Currently, I lead the tax function for Hitachi Energy in the Indian subcontinent and sub-Saharan Africa. So before this, I was with KPMG and Monsanto and SunEdison. So always, focused on taxation as a subject during my career. So that's about me. And that this award was it's called the Great Indian Tax Leader Award. It was given to me in Bangalore a couple of weeks back in a conference, in a CFO conference in Bangalore. So coming to the topic, what is wrong with the Indian tax system? I mean, while since independence, we have taken some steps for the betterment of tax structure in this country. It's still a very, very flawed tax system as such. We are a $3.7 trillion economy, and 20% of that is contributed by agriculture. So 20% of 3.7 trillion, that translates to around 60 lakh crore in Indian rupees. The entire 60 lakh crore rupees is out of the ambit of taxation. So that's the first flaw that I find, that 20% of the GDP of the country is out of the ambit of taxation. And that leads to a very low tax to GDP rate of 12%. Even if you see countries in Africa, like Botswana is at 22%, South Africa is at 25%, Brazil is at 32%. So unless government gets money, our public infrastructure will remain flawed and inefficient like the way it is. our health system, our education system, our public institutions. These are, there is a lot of scope for improving, and even our infrastructure. There's a lot of scope for improving all these, and all these things can happen only when the government has enough money to spend. The tax network, the very legal structure in this country is very complicated. Even the Income Tax Act is extremely complicated. Small businessmen find it a lot difficult to comply with the provisions of the income tax law. Even the income tax return for a businessman is not a simple one. It's a highly complicated one. He needs to hire a tax professional to get it done. He needs to get his accounts audited, maintain books. So a lot of complications surrounding the way tax compliance is to be done in this country. Also, once you file the return, once you comply, the tax audit that is conducted by the income tax department or even the GST department is often a lot of arbitrary actions are being taken. Say they will say 20% of your expense, I don't allow a deduction. Okay. Even that degree of arbitrariness is followed by the tax authorities. And then what you do, you file an appeal. Appeals will take time. You go to court. Matters in Supreme Court and High Court takes decades to get resolved. So yeah, so that's and even in GST, where we have unified the various sales tax rates in India, but we have still multiple rates. Various inputs are not subject to GST, so we can't get an input tax credit that increases the cost of doing business in this country. And even the GST return every month we have to file. Small businessmen find it extremely difficult to comply with the GST law. And then we have these digital transactions. A lot of multinationals are earning income from India through digital transactions, Facebook, Google, etc. are example. And they are hardly paying any tax because they don't have a fixed base or a permanent establishment in India. They're operating from outside India. So even that income becomes outside the ambit of taxation. So a lot of international cooperation would be required. Under the BEPS project, certain steps have been taken, certain suggestions have been provided, which could be implemented. But this is something that has to be resolved bilaterally and through multilateral agreements. And the digital is the future. So if the digital businesses become outside the ambit of taxation, that will certainly impair the tax collection drive of the government. In India, a large part of the economy is informal. They transact in cash. So those loopholes have to be plugged through a lot of enforcement activities. So broadly, these are the loopholes I find which are there in the Indian tax structure, tax system, which leads to a low tax to GDP ratio. And maybe the solution we can discuss through the course of this discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll pause here.
Sure. Thank you, Arindam, so much. So Nirmal, what's your take? Tell us about yourself, and then you're interested in the agricultural economy. So what's your take on what do we do? Is that fair? Yeah, fine. We set it up in the 50s and 60s. Is it about time to change? Will the people involved in agriculture feel even more part of India as one common family where everybody's pitching into taxes? So tell us about yourself and give us your thoughts on what do we do with taxing agriculture income.
So namaskar to all the panelists and those attending the meeting. And my first, foremost, my acknowledgement to Navneet sir for upholding the fraternity and conducting such a webinar. I'm Nirmal Matthew. I'm a tax lawyer with a law firm called Trilegal, and I'm a graduate from the Gujarat National Law University, and I also have a master's in international taxation from Nalsar, Hyderabad. So your question, Navneet sir, regarding agricultural income is very sensitive in India. Now, whether you want to tax or not tax agricultural income has a lot of divergent views. Now, ever since independence, we were an agrarian economy. Our backbone of our economy was agriculture. So we decided to give that sort of incentive to agriculture for people to go into the agricultural sector, and therefore removing it from the ambit of any sort of income tax. But fast forward to 2024, when agriculture is no longer the backbone of the Indian economy, there's a lot which needs to be done in taxing this sector. Now, probably a lot of economists such as Ajit Ranade or K.V. Viswanathan have spoken about the fact that agriculture is an untapped potential for the Indian economy. There's a lot of tax which can be collected. But I feel that there should be a gradual implementation of this. If at all there is an agricultural income tax which needs to be implemented, it should be gradual. Now, we saw the farm law bills which the current government brought about. Now, whether you may agree with it or not, it has its merits. But due to a lot of opposition, the farm bills did not get fruitified into being into the current policy framework. Now, as a result, this whatever reforms which were supposed to be done did not happen. The reason was a gradual phase-based implementation approach was not taken. Now, even if a through and through agricultural income tax is not being brought in, probably we can look at something like an agricultural value tax, or we look at an agricultural wealth tax where the rich farmers get taxed. So these are some of the sort of suggestions I have if you're looking at the taxing of the agricultural economy.
Great, thank you. I think the idea to do something gradual is probably what will work one day. Put them on notice that we're going to start 1 or 2 or 3 years from now and start taxing. And as it is, the first 5 lakhs is not getting taxed. So how many farmers are there in India? 150 million farmers. And maybe half of them are below 5 lakhs anyways. So they don't need to worry about it. But it's gonna, I don't know how the change will happen. It's almost like the farmers need to get up one day and say, hey, we want to participate in making India powerful and successful. Go ahead and tax us. We get enough other freebies, but I don't know if that'll ever happen. Is there a farmers industry body that we can brainwash to volunteer to be taxed? So Hirak, tell us what you do, where you are, what city, and you have a lot of ideas on how we can fix the tax system of India. So share.
Sure, sir. Thank you. First of all, good morning, everyone, all the panelists and attendees. Thank you, Navneet sir, for giving us this opportunity and platform to express our views on the topic. Before I answer that specific question, I would like to highlight the very much subject we had for our discussion. Can India be a first tax nation by 2047? The first paragraph or sentence which catches the eye is the year 2047. We are looking at a year which is 100-year post-independence. We are already 75 years beyond our independence, and further 20-25 years down the line, we see us as a country moving as a first tax nation. There are multiple things to be taken care of while doing so. And then gradually moving on to the answer, I'll first give a brief introduction about myself. I am Hirak Shah. I am a chartered accountant and a lawyer by qualification. I currently practice as an advocate at the Gujarat High Court and appear before various appellate authorities and jurisdictional authorities. For us over here to improve the tax system, which is presently there in our country, there are a multifaceted approach has to be adopted. The work has to be done on all phases. It is not only the taxpayer who has to work to make it a better platform. It is not only the government who has to work to provide a better platform. It has to be a hand-on-hand approach. With the advancement of information technology, there have been various options floated by the government themselves that taxpayers please come out, please pay the taxes. there are various compliances, nitty-gritties you have to look upon. Today, if a person starts one manufacturing business, he will be bound by at least 10 or 6 to 8 tax reforms, be it the income tax law, be it the goods and service tax law, the startup angel tax, whatever may be, all have to be taken into consideration. With the advancement of information technology in that direction, various compliance costs, which so far the present taxpayers have been faces, can be reduced. The cost of hiring a consultant or hiring an accountant for a businessman is such a huge task that they feel that let me do it by my own self. What it leads to confusion, errors, and ultimately leads to tax evasion, which directly affects the government in its revenue. We as professionals, consultants are a bridge between the government and the businessman. We do carry our duties diligently, but it requires a hand-holding support from all facets of the stakeholders, be it the government, be it the individuals, be it as tax consultants. Moving on, from the government side, I would say that simplification of tax laws, making it more simple, can be the first approach. We set aside the businessmen, it is the consultants, the tax lawyers itself, who at times find the tax laws very complex. If the consultant or the lawyer or the professional you are hiring is also facing challenges to understand the law, we cannot expect the businessman to carry it out smoothly. That is something which the government can do, in addition to providing a smoothing platform. All this has led to tax evasion, administrative inefficiencies, which has ultimately led to increased tax litigation. As Navneet sir rightly pointed out at the beginning of the session, the judicial system has been moving at a crawling pace. But that is not the only factor. It also judicial level. It all starts from base one, level one. If the government as well as for the taxpayer, and all three of us work simultaneously in the right direction, tax system can be simplified, and the target of us of being a first tax nation by 2047 can be smoothly achieved. I'll restrict my submissions to this question over here.
Okay, thank you so much. So you brought up 2047, and it's just talking about a title, and we just stuck to it. But one of the reasons for this, Hirak, is that U.S. got independence in 1789. The Constitution was adopted, and in 100 years, in 1889, it became the richest country in the world. Beat England that used to rule United States. So 100 years is all US took to become the #1 GDP country in the world. India was the #1 GDP country in the world from year 1 to 1750. India had 25% of the world GDP. In 1750, share of United States of world GDP was 0. Population was 2 million and nothing was going on. And then when it got independence in 1776 and became a country in 1789, the population was 3.5 million. But in 100 years, 1890, it beat England to become the richest country in the world. And so for India to start in 1947 with 350 million people, now if 350 million people get up in the morning and eat bread and eggs and drink milk, that alone is $1 trillion GDP. And so for India, for a country like 1.4 billion people, all we have to do is just consume a little bit more and stop buying gold and putting rupees under the mattress and start spending it. We will have a decent GDP. So for India, for us to ask India, listen, there's $100 trillion GDP today. If God was fair, first of all, if there is God, and if God was fair, all God has to do is wave a magic wand and say, okay, 192 countries in the planet, you get that percentage of the GDP as your population of the world. So India is 17% of the world population. India's share of the world GDP should be 17 trillion. Arindam just told us it's 3.7. That's $13.4 trillion being cheated from Indians. And okay, we can argue on another session on whose fault it is, But okay, 13 trillion, that's at least $1 trillion a month that's being stolen from us, and maybe we're letting it be stolen. Part of that is now being reported, 40% Black economy or whatever the percentage is now. Half of the country is exempt from filing taxes because they're doing agriculture, including Chidambaram, and 5% of the country files a tax return, and out of 5%, 3.5% pays taxes. So, we're not, and okay, so today the per capita income is $3,000 per person. To become a first world nation today, we need income of $15,000. That's a 5x multiple we have to achieve in 24 years. In 1978, per capita income of India and China was $300. Today, China is at 15,000 already, and we're at 3,000. So in the last 40 years, China, by hook or crook, or by working hard, or largely by selling stuff to United States, they have achieved parity. Their percentage of the world GDP today is exactly what their percentage of the world's population is. For India to get there, it's going to take the rest of the century. So I think the purpose of all of our lives in this planet is very simple. We will get there. India is 17% of the world. We will get to 17% of the world GDP one day, but we don't want that day to be 100 years from now. We want to hasten it. So one of the purposes of ILA is that, hey, lawyers of India, 1.5 million, wake up and let's do something. We got the country independence. Let's get out of prison first ourselves, and then let's fix the rest of the country. So I'm going to ask Hardeep and Rahul and Brijesh and Gagan to become the finance minister of India tomorrow for 30 days only. That's God's wish. And you have unlimited power in the next 30 days to do whatever you want, no objections. And our friend Gagan is a member of BJP anyways, so he already has a lot of power. So all of you, finance minister for 30 days, tell me 2, 3, 4 things you're going to do. Hardeep.
Hi, everyone. So thank you for having me. Just to introduce myself, and I'll take not a lot of time. I am a tax lawyer by profession. I graduated my undergrad law school in 2016, and I worked in M&A tax and international tax. And thereafter, I completed my LLM from NYU, and now I'm working in tax controversy and tax advisory. So if the question is very tempting, if I have this unbridled power to be the finance minister, once I think we need to understand what is lacking with India that when we compare it, to other nations. And I think there are 3 fundamental bedrock to tax compliance policy that when you design. One is the cost of collection. That how much rupee you're spending to collect a rupee on taxes. That is number 1. Now, if you look at the statistics, 90% of Indian taxes that are self-assessed by individuals are accepted, and only 10% are litigated. And out of that 10%, the revenue, even after improving themselves, still lose about 5 rupees for every 10 rupees that they collect. Now that's a high tax, collection, rate that the Indian taxpayer has to spend on. Number 2 is the compliance cost. As Hirak rightly said, the Indian tax regime is very complicated. And to just give you an example, a person, a micro, enterprise working in India has to file 37 tax returns annually in any particular state that he's operating. Now that's 3 returns per month only for GST. Income tax is separate. Deduction of tax at source is different. Now, all these compliance costs do add up. And as Hirak said, if the advisor himself is feeling, the heat of tax compliance, the businessman who wants to comply is unable to comply. Or if he complies, there may be an error and he'll receive a notice. The third is the difference that will arise when you impose tax on something, that will have, unintended allocation cost on the resource. Now let's assume someone buys a mutual fund. He wants to shift into a mutual fund, but then again, that will be a taxable event. There's no rollover benefit in that sense unless you invest in real estate. Now, having laid out all these three parameters, I think there are three points that needs to be considered from a policy perspective, and then I'll come to the specifics if the time allows me to. Now, one is that we suffer annual amendments to the range of 100 to 200 amendments per year, and we call it the Finance Act. Now, you look at other countries, you look at Ireland. Ireland for the longest time had 12.5% tax as corporate tax rate. India changes, the rate, it changes the regime every year. Now, these amendments leads to two things. One, uncertainty in how a business is expected to pay taxes. And number two, he or his advisor for that matter will not be in a position to help you, have a predictable regime that, when I start a business, I know that these are the taxes I'm supposed to pay.
So Hardeep, your finance minister, are you reducing the highest rate of 39%?
I will do that. I will do that because there are two things. One, the highest rate is paid by the people who constitute 0.01% of the economy. So instead of tapping on to the higher, in tax rate for those people, because it's a low hanging fruit, to be very honest, the idea should be to, widen the tax base of the country. Now, imagine a person who's in a tier 2 city and he wants to pay taxes. The question is, his purchase is in cash, his sale is in cash. He cannot pay taxes, even if he wants to, because the purchasers will not, accept money in his account, and the sales will not be through banking channels. So those are the things that, when you widen the tax base, you sort of, help level so that someone who wants to evade is a separate question. But someone who wants to pay and can't pay, that is a low-hanging fruit that you should be tapping on.
Okay, let's hear from Finance Minister Brijesh. What are you doing, Brijesh? Mute. You're muted, Brijesh.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity. Good morning to all of you, sir. I am Dr. Brijesh Kumar Singh, presently working teaching in Faculty of Law, Allahabad University. I did my LLB, LLM from Faculty of Law and PhD from Faculty of Law, Delhi University, DU. And today
why are you studying so much?
I don't know, sir. I attempted for IAS exams, IAS PCS exam, judicial exam, and now after a lot of education and hard work, I am imparting education in Allahabad University. Okay. And fortunately today I am in Delhi for casting my vote, and so whatever I have understanding about economics and taxes and agriculture taxes and law and courts, I will definitely try to bring out some fruitful knowledge. Be in India, tax base is very limited, and it should be broadened by encompassing informal sector into tax base, and there should be a civic sense among people that they should, whatever amount they can contribute for the nation, they should aspire, they should try to fill their income tax returns. And there should be education that everybody at whatever stage they are, they should file their income tax, even they should file their own. And with the demonetization nowadays there this financial inflow and this financial transaction has now become in control of it is visible to financial to revenue officers now, and but there are problems that few shopkeepers, even some are very poor, that they don't have UPIs, etc. But I have seen various examples where big businessmen, like in Kanpur, a gutka businessman, and there are various like food processing industries, like samosa and kachori, etc. They make a lot of money, but they sometimes prevent. They deny that they will not take online payment. So there should be vigilance on such people, that they should file, they should make online transactions. And sometimes people think that even people don't start filing. They do business in cash, and sometimes they make mistake. They do crime unintentionally by doing these things, that they don't do business online. They don't do business by check, etc. There should be proper education by banks, by revenue authorities, that whatever transaction, a big transaction like lakh rupees, 2 lakh rupees, it should always be done uh, through online mode, through checks, and never, whoever says that do it in cash, one should always deny that I will not do it in cash. So sometimes, suppose somebody has made some transaction there unintentionally, there should be a process of forgiveness, and that now come onward. Now onward, you should start transacting and filing your this income tax regularly. There should be minimum penalty that come in the regime of tax. And
why don't we ban all cash transactions throughout the country?
yes, sir. Almost it is banned, but it is not
Except
possible.
except in Allahabad.
No, sir. Everywhere people
No, but you're
use
saying
cash.
it's banned, but
Even
if I look,
even
the
bank
per
allow to withdraw cash. Even bank allow to withdraw cash, and later on, problem comes when there comes accountability that so much cash money where has gone, from where has it come, then there comes the difficulty. And
Right.
On the point of law, I will say that law always should be dynamic and accommodate the changing situations, to bring into further taxes, that further head of taxes, like we are in the age of information technology, and we have seen one case, Vodafone case, in that we have lost about billion trillion dollars, that we had not that law. So we have now made that law, and I will say that in company law, uh, various companies are formed to evade taxes. So they should be brought into account, and there shouldn't be delay in court process, and economic matters should be resolved quickly. There are some cases, there are instances that many years pass to book into account the people who do such tax evasions. One case is Sir Dinsa Manik Sapetit. He had formed 4 companies to show that is not getting benefit, he is not getting a profit, but predicted that borrowed money from 4 companies. That was that was tax evasion.
Brijesh, I read in Economist magazine last month that the 5 southern states of India paid 25% of India's tax last year, and Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh combined paid 3%. Is that accurate? It is?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It is rightly said, and there should be such culture, there should be such education, and there should be such policies and laws that there should be increase in number of taxpayers, and there should be the prevention of this.
Forget Khalistan.
tax
Forget Khalistan. The 5 southern states are going to want to leave India if they have to pay 25% of tax. Let's go to Rahul, who's in a southern state of Bangalore. So Rahul, you finance minister, what are we doing? Do you want to leave India or what?
No, not absolutely. So my take on this is that there are problems like the esteemed panelists, they have highlighted. There are for sure problems with the compliance system. The tax laws are complicated. There are issues with how we do the compliances. But one more issue which we see is that at a broad level, if you're talking about GDP to tax ratio, like as you also rightly mentioned, sir, the per capita GDP is not at par with the other economies where we are comparing the GDP to tax ratio. So India has a very large population, and only 10% of India's population, 10% of the households are considered affluent and people who can spend on other things apart from their very basic necessities. So if 10% of the people are affluent and out of them 5%, 6% of them are already filing taxes and paying taxes, then we don't have a very large gap. So 65-70% of the Indian economy is rural economy, and they are dependent on agriculture. Again, in agriculture, if 70%, 65% of the economy is in agriculture, and out of that 70% are marginalized farmers. They are farmers who have less income, or they are farm laborers. So a study said that if someone is having less than 10 hectare of a land in India, or for that sense anywhere, they earn an income which anyway does not require us to pay taxes. It will be less than what is exempted from taxes. And it is only 1% of the farmers who are paying, who are in the category who are having more than 10 hectares of land. If 1% of the farmers are having more than 10 hectares of land, and if we are taxing them, it would not add more than 10% to the total tax revenue, direct tax revenue, which we are talking about. So,
but don't you think if 10 people are living in a family and everybody's eating and everybody has a roof and everybody has electricity, then everybody should pay for part of the family budget? It doesn't matter who they are.
Absolutely, no? Absolutely. So people who can afford, even in the farmer category, in the agriculture sector, people who are earning and who can afford, they should be covered under the taxes. As the panelists rightly said, there can be a gradual progression into that. But what is the component which we are talking about right now? It's not something which is going to make our tax revenue double. It will increase by 10%. It can be a good step, but there is a underlying problem in the overall system and economy where when we are talking about increasing the base from the revenue perspective, from the income of people who are living in the country. If we are talking about like 70% of the people are dependent on agriculture, and they
so
contribute
Rahul, where is the biggest leakage? What is, if you were finance minister and you could do 2-3 things, what component is it? The business people? Is it people of Mumbai? Is it self-employed? Who's not paying their fair of taxes? And what's the biggest leakage?
So I would focus on moving the rural and agricultural population into manufacturing and service sector. So if that population, there is a population who is overburdened there and who are not contributing to the GDP in the percentage of their population, moving them out from the rural economy to the urban manufacturing and service sector would increase their income, disposable income, and will automatically formalize that part of the economy and also help increase the tax revenues.
Okay. So Finance Minister Gagan, since you're closest to the Prime Minister, you have a lot of power. Now do something. What are you going to do?
Well, at the very outset, I'm an inconsequential Karyakarta, so I am
Yeah.
not as close as you perceive me to be. Nonetheless, anyways, talking more on the philosophical side of the taxation, see, the primary objective of any taxation is threefold. One, to raise revenue, to which you adverted to that it's only 12% to the GDP. Second is to bring about some change in the economic or the social perspective. For those reasons, we have SEZs or the special economic zones or areas identified as backward areas to promote some sort of manufacturing or more economic activity, thereby generating employment in that area. And third consideration is usually to prohibit or discourage the consumption of certain goods or articles or services. So, for example, you talk about Bitcoin, you talk about gutka, you talk about liquor, so all those things. So essentially, the any tax policy would be aimed to achieve one of these three aspects. Now, the biggest challenge in India is, I would say, not on the um, tax laws perspective, but the enforcement of it. And before enforcement, it is the psychological aspect of it. For the longest period of time, we lived in a what I called a pseudo socialism, or a very deranged form of communism, and which is at times is being promoted by various political parties and what we often call as freebies. That is where the leakage is actually. Now, to a large extent, that has been covered and has been taken care of. But again, when we talk about the enforcement of the laws, now the formalization took place through demonetization, through the promotion of Jan Dhan account, etc., and the prominent use of UPI and introduction of GST. But if you look at the application side of it, the enforcement side of it, what is happening is that the GST officers with unbridled powers they have got, they've started abusing the provisions. And that is where we come to the basic point that what is the smallest unit of a country? If we are talking about changing the country, we need to look at the smallest unit. The smallest unit of any country is an individual. Now, the question is, what is the level of integrity of an individual in India is? Most of the people, including you, would have migrated essentially because the degree of fairness you find in the Western society, you're not finding here. And that's what discourages the youth also when they wish to start any business in India. And essentially, we need to address those aspects. And the ancient philosophy, Indian philosophy, has been dharma, arth, kam, and moksha. It has to be in the same sequence. Now, dharma here does not refer to any religion. It essentially refers to righteousness. So once you have the level of righteousness in you, then earning money is not is not a problem. The problem comes that when there is a tax evasion, and why there is a tax evasion, we often say this often quoted sentence that tax is the price of civilization. But we are ready to pay that price. But the question then comes is that are we getting that civilization? So when we talked about the leakage, leakage is not on the tax collection part. It is essentially where the tax money is being spent at. If it is being spent on constructing a road, which is not even enduring one summer, then of course I am not very keen on putting on my taxes. So that is when I start leading or start gravitating towards tax evasion. Now, somebody talked about Ireland having a tax rate of 12.5% for ages, and we have been oscillating from 90% to 30%. Of course, one, we had that philosophical issue of the baggage of the communism in a different pirated form. But apart from that, you see, countries like Ireland, they hardly have any population. So they have nothing else to offer. We are a country full of natural resources. We even OECD, unfortunately, and I take offense to the term, they use India as a market economy. We are more than that. We ought to be more than that. There's huge dependence on the agriculture sector. We talk about, and my previous speaker touched upon it, that there's most of the farmers are marginalized farmers. If you really do their calculation, they hardly make any money. They barely survive. And to your point that, okay, despite that, why everyone should not contribute to the tax? Yes, they should, only if they have the ability. Now, a farmer who is barely finding it to make his ends meet, you want him to hire a chartered accountant, that would be grossly unfair on his part. But at the same time, the level of agriculture income which is currently reported in India, if it is true, this country has enough food grain for the next 30 years. So obviously the agriculture income which is being disclosed is highly inflated. And that must be inspection and audit on those agriculture income, because that agriculture income is being used as a tool to avoid tax. You declare whatever you figure you may have as agriculture income, nobody is likely to question it. I personally have come across cases where people have declared agriculture income of a particular crop which could not have been uh, cultivated in a particular region. So that's the level of innovation people come up with. So coming to the point of how to make it a first world nation using the tax policy, I think we need to gradually shift uh, towards making the population as job creator rather than job seeker. We keep on abusing our industrialists, but when we say only 2% of the people are actually paying taxes, the effective taxes, but if you look at it, only 2% of the people are essentially engaged in the meaningful businesses. Rest of us are looking for jobs continuously. Why do a government, or why do a young child is ready to burn a train or bus for a government job? Why is he so keen to get on a government job? The question is that it is not, he is not interested in serving the public. The answer is that he is essentially want to make money by not working anything. So we need to relook at the administrative reforms, the way taxes are utilized, and the leakage essentially is on the consumption of tax money.
So, Arindam, is there tax leakage in India, and what is it? What percentage is it? And how many millions or billions of dollars? Somebody did a research and they found out that the tax leakage in United States is $800 billion, and US collects about $4 trillion in tax, spends $7 trillion, is a shortfall of $3 trillion this year, and borrows it, which is the budget of India, is what US is short, and collects $4 trillion, but there is a shortfall leakage of $800 billion. Now, so one of the ways US, for instance, and other countries have curbed the tax leakage is that there's 50 states in the country, 41 of them have a state taxation system. So not only have people in the United States have to file a federal tax return, and there's 160 million adults working in the country and 100% tax compliance, all 160 million file a tax return. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why. So you have to file a federal return, you have to file a state return. So if the federal government you escape from and you don't pay taxes, then there's a state government you have to deal with. The minute the state government audits you, the first thing they do is send a copy of it to the federal government and vice versa. So there's a check and balance. Then there's 4 levels of government, like counties and districts and cities and states and federal. So all 4 have a handout. The county wants property tax for all the personal property you have. The city wants a license tax based on how many number of employees you have or what your income is. So it's a joke is that there's 4 levels of government and they're your partners and there's 4 hands out and you have to give money to everyone. The county, all the 3,058 counties of United States, they have a property tax, 1 to 2% on all the real estate properties you own. So if you have a house, you have a building, you have to pay property tax. And the county uses the property tax for everything that's important in a human being's life, water and fire and electricity and road and trash and schools, etc. Then the government in 1935 put in a social security system. So every single employee in the United States, 7.65% of their salary is taken out and dumped into a social security fund. The employer has to match it every month, every paycheck throughout the country. So the employee out of $100 pays $7.65. The employer matches it, $7.65. Total of $15.30 is sent to the government for a special trust fund. When somebody turns 65, they get retirement income for the rest of their life. They could live one day and they get paid for one day. They could live 35 years till 100, and the government will continue to send them $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month. The biggest check that's ever been written to a retiree went out last month of $4,873. And that person will get a 2-3% increase every year for the rest of their life. As they turn 65, they get free medical care for the rest of their life based on this 7.65%. Out of the 7.65, 1.45% is for medical and 6.2% is for retirement. But what ends up happening is because people know that when they get old, they will need some money and they'll get free medical, they happily, while they're earning and they're young, they continue to contribute. So when they continue to contribute, the payroll is linked to their income tax. So then the federal government gets the income tax, the state government gets the income tax, the Social Security collects its money, and finally, all of the credit system to get loans and home loans is tied to your tax return. Anytime you want a loan for any purpose, the bank says, show us your tax return. So I would say half of the country is showing more income than or not cheating because they want loans. I've had instances where somebody would say, report $10,000 more in income than I've had. We pay $2,500 more in tax, but I want to be able to get a loan. So my question to you, Arindam, is it time that we did something drastic and puts all these checks and balances to reduce the tax leakage?
So I think a primary reason why people in India do not pay tax is that they perceive very limited benefit from paying these taxes. There is no social security network in place, no pension, no medical benefit once the person retires. So there is very little incentive for him for paying the taxes. And he gets help from the informal economy that we have. So one part or one aspect to plug this is obviously to plug the informal economy, bring in a lot of data analytics to see where these leakages are so that these get plugged and people become more compliant. Also, we are discussing about cash transactions. So one suggestion, there are a lot of lawyers present here. So any cash, or if any person is found to hold cash in excess of 20 lakhs, could there be a law that that money would belong to government? It will be seized then and there. Because nobody will generally need cash more in excess of 20 lakhs, right? So, there's a lot of focus that the government has done in terms of digital payment, etc. It has really picked up. People are now saying that digital transaction will exceed $1 trillion per year in India from next year. So that's one more aspect. And yeah, I think since we are vying for a developed nation, we as citizens of this country also need to behave as citizens of a developed nation. So yeah, government, we have a national pension scheme that is primarily a voluntary scheme as such. The government needs to provide some incentive to people to encourage them to contribute towards taxation. In this year's BJP's manifesto, one point is that everybody will get free medical cover up to rupees 5 lakhs if they are more than 70 years of age. So that's an incentive, right? So I think similar incentives for a pension post-retirement could be brought in for all taxpayers who are contributing. It may be a small amount to start with, but to encourage people where to see benefits. Okay, and only when people see benefit that this will, I mean, more tax compliance would come in, and a proper study of the structure of agricultural income, like who are the rich farmers, how many rich farmers are there, and who are the poor farmers. So obviously, poor farmers should not be taxed, but how many are rich farmers? What could be the potential tax collection from these persons? And these data could be very easily available because farmers mostly sell their produce to the government under the MSP. So these are a few steps which government should take to make people more compliant and encourage people to be more compliant so that we have a better tax to GDP ratio. And lastly, I think we should move from a income tax regime to a expenditure tax regime. Like our highest individual tax rate is at 39%. Okay, most of us pay at 33% for an income bracket of say 50 to 100 lakhs, a little more, 50 to 1 crore, 50 lakhs to 1 crore, and more than 1 crore, a little more, 34%. So while this should be brought down because China is at 25, Singapore is at 17.5. Even countries like Malaysia and Indonesia is at 20%. So there is no reason.
Arindam, the happiest 5 countries in the planet every year, the Northern European 5 countries, are at 55%.
True, but look at the social benefit that they provide, the social security benefit that they provide. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't have anything.
To intervene.
Yeah.
Sorry
please.
to intervene. Corporate tax rate is essentially actually 22% in India. So what you're referring to is that's the personal tax rate.
Yeah, I was referring to the personal tax. Corporate income tax rate is 25, 22 per surcharge, but for new manufacturing companies, it will be 17%. So that is fine. But for individuals, I mean, it's a social benefit, social security network, essentially for individuals. So they are not perceiving any tangible benefit from contributing. And that's a primary driver for tax evasion for them.
Nirmal, you have ideas on how to end this black money? The formal, which last I read was 40% of the Indian economy. What are the ideas to reduce that to zero?
So the topic of black money is something which haunts all of us. Now, primarily black money is what is not accounted in the Indian accounting system. So if any money is not accounted, if it is not formalized, it can be termed as black money. Now, in the Indian context, like the other panelists have mentioned, there are a lot of leakages. Now, it can be in the context of the informal economy, where a lot of the Indian economy survives on the informal economy and which is not taxed. Then again, on the various leakages due to bad policy measures by the governments. This all contributes to a vicious cycle of black money in India. Now, at a global level, we've been looking at the OECD base erosion and profit shifting action plans which have come about. We are looking at the UN Tax Committee resolution. So we're looking at a regime, global regime, where we are trying to reduce this black money phenomenon which is happening across the world. Now, I'm sure our esteemed panelists know about various structures like the Irish double tax sandwich, which are all tax saving measures which companies like Apple and Google use in Europe. So these are some of the sort of global measures which we need to sort of undertake, and India is also at the forefront of this. Now, if you look at the OECD discussions which were held in Paris and the G20 discussions which were held in India, India has been at the forefront of of course tax policy measures, and Gagan sir also talked about the enforcement. Now, the phenomenon of ED raids, income tax raids are always there. So there is a sense of deterrence in the Indian economy that, okay, you can't keep black money anymore. But there's a lot to be done in terms of behavioral economics. Now, Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics, talks about this nudge theory of how you need to nudge people to be tax compliant. So if more and more people are being tax compliant, of course, this phenomenon of black money also reduces. Then again, this is all a very gradual process. There is no magic wand which can say that black money will be wiped out. So demonetization was looked to be a magic wand, but we know the effects of it. So instead of looking at quick fix measures of reducing black money, I think the Indian government is looking at the long-term measures at the policy level as well as at the enforcement level. And I think, as our other esteemed panelists have said, a lot of measures need to be done in formalizing the economy and looking at increasing the tax compliance.
So Hardeep, we had from 1950 or something to 1985, we had death tax.
Yeah.
About 30 countries around the world have death tax. US has a death tax of 40% over $12 million per person. So husband, wife, if they leave any money beyond 24 million, they have to pay 40% tax. When Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Elon Musk die with 100 billion, the government will get 40 billion in tax unless they give money to charity. Then whatever they give to charity, then that person is not taxed. So Bill Gates has said, for instance, he'll leave out of his 100 billion, he'll leave 3 billion each to his 3 kids, and the balance 91 billion he'll give. On that 91 billion, there'll be no 40% tax. He'll go to Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The 3 kids will get 3 billion each. They'll have to pay 40% tax, 1.2 billion, and then they'll be left with a measly $1.8 billion to live the rest of their life. I don't know what the heck was going on in 1985. I think VP Singh was finance minister and Rajiv Gandhi was prime minister. I don't think there was a billionaire in India in 1985. I don't know who said to remove the death tax. Fine, it was removed for whatever, maybe we weren't collecting enough tax. But now to put it back is almost impossible. What are we going to do? Do we want death tax back or no?
So before, coming to the question, as we've alluded that the social security system in India is low. And now, putting a death tax when someone who's earned that income has already paid income tax at the time of, earning that income. And now at an arbitrary timeline, which is, someone's death, you impose a tax on inheritance. I think that's just morally bankrupt. And I'll tell you why. Because one, in the US, you get cost step up of the shares. Let's say what Bill Gates leaves. You will get the children will get the cost step up. India, you will never get cost step up. And, the cost of acquisition will remain as of, how much Bill Gates acquired it to be. Now, having said that, so there are no taxes which are lost. And someone does not need to sell a property or liquidate a property just to pay taxes. So there is no tax duress at time of someone's death. It is at economic considerations when someone, can liquidate their investment. So and personally, I mean, effectively, when you're levying the death tax, you're just punishing someone for virtuous use of their money than someone who's, let's say, is a spendthrift. So someone who's, spending on Porsches versus someone who has a suburban life, lives below his means and wants to give money to his children. So effectively, you're taxing someone, on how they want to use their money. And I personally think that's a very cruel way of taxing, especially when you have no social security. Your tax rates are so high. It's 39% at the highest rate, your individual tax rate, plus you pay a GST of nearly 18 to 28% of most of the goods. Effectively, you're only left with 40 rupees that you have on every 100 that you earn. And on top of that, you impose a debt tax. To me, I mean, it really sounds very cruel. And the fundamental premise for why I'm saying this is that you cannot tax yourself into a prosperity. No nation can, tax more people and then become prosperous. To become prosperous, and I think I concur with what Rahul said, you need to have structural changes in the economy. You need to give more opportunities to people. You need to make them employable. You need to make them, generate value instead of punishing those people who at the top have, spent last 40 years making that wealth. Because to be very honest, I mean, India has just become a sort of a capitalist economy, if I can say that, from 1990. So this will be the first generation who will actually be generating some sort of meaningful wealth. Now, taxing them again at time of death will not will I mean, it will not be will not make will not result in meaningful revenue, and will not help in what we are trying to achieve, which is social equality through imposing that debt tax.
But do you think it might motivate the very rich to leave money to charities when they die, and it would encourage a big boost to the nonprofit sector of India?
So they may, I mean, out of possible two things, what is more likely is that they'll immigrate to other nations. When what is happening as well, instead of leaving it to charity. I mean, of course, this is my hunch of what is happening, but
Charlie Munger used to say that for tax purposes, I wouldn't even move across the street. But then he died at
but Charlie
99.
Munger was a different man.
So Hirak, one of the reasons why there's 100% tax filing compliance in a country like US, 160 million people work and 160 million file a tax return, is that the government instituted a program called Earned Income Credit, that, hey, person, get up in the morning, get ready, get in the car, eat your breakfast and drive to work, even though you are getting paid minimum wages and you work 8 hours and come back home and take care of the kids and cook dinner and then go to sleep and then go to work. We'd like for you not to stand on the street and beg. We'd like for you not to cheat and steal. We'd like for you to not file for unemployment. We'd like for you not to file a fake disability claim. We'd like for you to work. And okay, if you're working and you have a child, file a tax return and we'll see how much money you're making. And if you're making over $30,000, $40,000 a year, we'll tax you first at 10%, then at 12, then at 15, then at 20, then over 250,000 at 30% or whatever. But if you're not making enough money and you're a single mother and you have 2 kids at home, and you made $25,000, file a tax return and we'll send you a check of $10,000. So 23 million people out of the 160 million that file a tax return get a check from the government in February, calendar year, December, January. These people quickly file a tax return, and throughout the country in February, there are sales, mattress, beds, bicycles, cars. Most of the people that get this earned income credit pay off their debt that they incurred during the year to live. And then any big purchases, they'll wait. So what do you think of that? Should India do it?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And building on those lines of what you said, it all starts from the government. If the government is running promotional campaigns, educating more and more people as to what is the benefits of this ultimately for the economy, for the country, for their own general public at large, how it will be fruitful in the long run. This is all the stepping stone which the government has to set up for the entire process to be smooth. And to be honest with you, here in India, we do see the government, especially after 2015 or 2016, have taken steps and increased leaps and bounds to undertake reforms and practices by way of which they are able to spread awareness among the general people as to what is this whole purpose, who is the ultimate financial and beneficial holder. Ultimately, is all for the general public at large. The government has been proactive in setting up help desk center. The other name for that is GST Seva Kendra, which we call it over here. They have been very much diligent in that ways to set up such centers, educating the normal taxpayers, those taxpayers who cannot afford a consultant. For them, the tax return filings are done free of cost. That is something, a big step which the government has taken in the right direction for the ultimate beneficial of a general public at large.
Right.
Smoothening of the tax filing system, removing of administrative inefficiencies are all part of the process which every country has faced during their journey. For that as well, with the advancement of information technology in India, in all metro major cities of India, that has been a big step where we see that at least 50% of those who are educated are now aware of how to basic use the internet facility available at their home and office. They just need the basic knowledge of what is to be done next to take it forward. As rightly pointed out by you, sir, in various developed countries, they have been providing incentives that if you do compliance of such things, you will be rewarded. Similarly, over here in India, we don't have such incentives at large, but what we have is penalties and late fees. To speak further on that, and just to share an insight, under the GST law, if someone files a belated return, there are late filing fees which are applicable over and above the normal interest and penalty. Now, late filing fees are applicable per day. Such thing, what it helps is to ensure that every taxpayer keeps a track of what is happening. And if that person is filing a return belatedly once or twice, on the third or fourth occasion is aware that yes, this is what is happening. This, I would say, sir, is a big step for ensuring compliance, which is done in a time-bound manner and carried out thoroughly. So I would definitely buy your point, and to add to it, yes, we as our country should definitely adopt reforms and practices what other developed countries have throughout in the past.
Gagan.
Yeah, so I'll slightly disagree. Look at the size of the population itself, and we are dealing with a huge number as compared to what US is dealing with. Secondly, in terms of the social security and providing support to the poor strata of the society, currently there are various schemes which are going on. Like there are free ration being given to close to 80 crore families in India. So they may not be filing the return, but they're still getting the ration. And similarly, in terms of the medical support, there are other schemes like Ayushman Bharat and all, where they can get medical treatment free of cost. So it is not necessary that what may have been useful in a Western hemisphere may be equally relevant in the Eastern hemisphere. And on the same point, you talked about the inheritance tax or the death tax. See, Asian communities by and large have joint families, unlike the Western hemisphere. So I don't think that's a good idea in any case. One of the reasons why Japan could create conglomerate, because they had this family business setup. So you have Toyotas of the world, you have Honda's family, you have Suzuki family. So it's not necessary that and again, the reason for getting or pushing or compelling people to go for inheritance tax was to garner funds for the not-for-profit organizations. And if you look at the true objective of any not-for-profit organization, they essentially supplement what government ought to be doing. So in a way, they support government activities, and that is why they are called NGOs, non-government organizations. But they end up doing the same welfare activities. And I don't see any challenge for any genuine NGO in India to raise funds if they really want to do something. So I think both these ideas may be relevant in the Western Hemisphere, but I don't think they're relevant for India.
Right. I got news for you, Gagan. Anybody worth 100 billion anywhere doesn't have any family anymore. Okay, so Brijesh, I wanted to ask you, are the banks in India not asking for tax returns when they give loans, and aren't people motivated to report their entire income?
Sir, banks do not ask about their income, but they ask for CIBIL score. If there is little bit delay in paying your debt, then they generally disallow to take you loans, etc. And really, there is a lack of such education that there are incentive that even people know that because of tax development projects government do, but there isn't awareness in public that because by filing tax, incentives are there, incentives like social security, etc.
So Rahul, you get the last word. So this policy that every single tax return has to be approved by the government, this is kind of unique, right? Like, are we ever going to move away from it?
I think the tax returns are they are system driven, self-assessed as of now. So the tax returns, they get checked for their accuracy and they get automatically processed. So it's not that each and every return is manually reviewed and then processed. So they are system driven processing systems which are there, and only 2 to 5% of the cases are selected for assessments and scrutinies, and they go through in-depth verification. Otherwise, the both at the goods and service tax level and at the income tax level, it's technology and system-driven processing, which is not taking a lot of time. Last year, like within 24 hours of filing of income tax return, the returns were processed and refunds were credited to the bank account of the people who had filed the return. So this is something which has been achieved, and the system is capable of doing it. It's just that more prudence and more simplification is required in this direction.
Thank you. Thank you, Hirak. Thank you, Nirmal. Thank you, Brijesh. Thank you, Arindam. Thank you, Hardeep. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Gagan, very, very much for giving us your valuable time. We learned a lot today. This session will be on YouTube and Facebook. So thank you. And we will bug you again next year for sure. We're not going to forget you. We make a list of all the speakers who do a good job, and you're certainly on that list. So thank you. Thank you very much. And whichever city you're in, please get involved in the ILA chapter in your city. More than likely, we have an ILA chapter in your city. And if there isn't one, then please start one. We'll help you become president of the local chapter in your city. If there is a president, become president-elect, get 16 board members, and then do an event on the third Thursday of every month, which is what we ask all of our ILA chapters to do. So thank you an incredible much, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, Hardeep. How are you doing?
Hi.
I'm good, sir. How are you?
Very good. Thank you.